very good evening, and I welcome all of my listeners and audiences on Chai Chat Community by Word Palette. Thank you for joining us on a very important topic today or tonight, depending on whichever part of the world you're watching us from. I'm going to talk about South Asian women and their finances. What stops us or what encourages us to manage our finances better? And as you can see, I'm joined by Professor Supriya Singh, adjunct professor, Department of Social Inquiry, La Trobe University. Supriya, very good evening. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Thanks, Chris.
Supriya, before we get into the conversation, I would just like to quickly acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting tonight. I come from the people of the Kuli Nation, and I would also like to extend my respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Supriya, very important topic. Being a South Asian woman of color myself, I've often struggled with my finances. So now we have you, the expert. The first thing that I would like to start off with is women use more of their money on their household chores and their children than usually men. From where do you see this pattern coming across, or is it a universal pattern across cultures?
Thanks, Chris. This is perhaps the one of the two universal factors that are
Hmm.
the same for women across cultures.
Right.
And so, women, when you put a figure to it, they use, say, about 90% of their money on the home and the children,
Hmm.
compared to men, about 60%. And that is why in some countries like Australia, the money that is supposed to go to the children comes to the women rather than the men.
Hmm.
It's kind of, also the idea of a woman being, self-effacing, putting herself last.
Right. Right. What you're saying, Supriya, comes to me as a cultural learning. We are often told that, you put your family first, you are the last person to eat at the dinner table, so on and so forth. How do you get women and men in the household to unlearn their values so that there's equity in the dynamic? Not equality, but we're talking about equity here.
Actually, there's even very little equity in the dynamics,
Hmm.
and there women coming last in terms of money, in terms of wealth, in terms of employment participation in the workforce. India's women, maybe, it's around 1 in 5. Yeah, we are even less than Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, even less than Pakistan now. And it is going down as the women are getting more and more educated. So I think in India, still, it is a very male control of money, male control of land. So I wouldn't even talk of equity there.
Hmm.
But the danger is when women put themselves last,
Hmm.
they are also modeling this behavior for their daughters.
Right.
And putting yourself last is sometimes means that you don't talk about money.
Hmm.
It's as if, it is a male sphere. You don't want to upset the boat, as it were. Issues of power lurk behind talking of money.
Right.
But if you don't talk of money, then you are in danger sometimes of family violence,
Hmm.
economic abuse in
Yeah.
particular.
Yeah. I'll come to financial abuse and economic abuse in later, but whatever you mentioned, Supriya, just kind of made me think about generational wealth, right? Often I read across articles where there's a huge debate going on whether women are entitled to their father's property after getting married, so on and so forth. What are your views on that? That women still have to fight for their rights even after getting married, or should they have an inherent right to their father's property, irrespective of their marital status?
Chris, women and men in legal terms
Hmm.
have equal rights
Yeah.
to ancestral wealth.
Yeah.
But land is the real sticky point. I remember interviewing a couple, an older couple, and they were talking about inheritance.
Right.
And they were saying, oh, well, now we will give we will, give something to our daughter.
Hmm.
And they were willing to share whatever was non-landed wealth. But when they came to land, the man and the woman said, no, 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 this only goes to the sons. And he started saying that, all my family history is etched in the land rights, yeah, in the
Mm.
land title. That
Yeah.
when you go, my grandfather, my father, and now me, and it goes down the male line. And if a woman wants the land, there is a word for her, hak lene wali aa gayi hai. That means here comes the woman who is trying to execute her rights.
Yeah.
And the whole system of land management, of land titles, the gateway is through men. So only a UN study showed that in India, only 1 in 8 women inherit land.
Wow. Mm.
Especially agricultural land.
Yes.
There has been a change. There has been a change.
Yeah.
Uh, when I was interviewing women over here, older women would tell me, how their brothers would come with the affidavit,
Yeah.
present it to them because she had the right to equally inherit, and
Mm.
present it to them and say, sign. And without speaking, the woman knew what the choice was. You
Mm.
want the property or you want the brother.
Yeah.
Many women signed it off. But then they said when it comes to them giving their property, they will make sure that their daughters inherit.
Mm. But Supriya, you spoke about that you've interviewed couples, you've interviewed young people.
Mm.
Do you
Mm.
see a pattern of unlearning, a willingness to unlearn what these guys have learned in their home countries? And do you
Yeah.
see that pattern of evolution for a modern mindset adaptation while they are in Australia or any other Western part of the world?
Yes, and depends where you are situated. Agricultural land, if it's agricultural land in India, and the woman is over here, and even if the man is over here, the inheritance of agricultural land is usually not possible. And migrants, anyway, unless the parents have migrated and brought the money, migrants, anyway, do not inherit equally, compared to the siblings in the home country.
Right.
Yes, there is a lot of talk about autonomy. There is a lot of talk about, we are equal and together. But there is also mixed metaphors there. You will say, okay, I earn enough, but only a little bit. He earns a little bit more than I do. And this business of allowing the man a sense of entitlement, for family harmony still is there.
Hmm.
Sometimes, though, it's not so much here. In India, I see some of the young women in the same family, there are differences. One of
Right.
my young friends, the grandfather went around this law
Hmm.
and distributed the land to his sons and grandsons before dying. So there was
Hmm.
no inheritance issue. But the young cousin of my friend, she put her father and mother on notice. She said, now, if you do this, I'm going to take you to court.
Very brave of her.
But one cousin did it, and one cousin knows that all right, it's a done deal, and this, she's not going to inherit.
Hmm.
She's
Hmm.
not going to inherit land.
Hmm. From what I hear from you, Supriya, is I can see a lot of disparity, and we've also seen that back in the country. It's no hidden truth. This brings me to the next part of the conversation, which is about financial abuse or economic abuse. To start with, Supriya, could you please tell us about the different kinds in which somebody could be abused financially, or a South Asian woman in particular? How are they abused on a financial term?
There are three main aspects to this. And
Mm.
when we talk about financial abuse, usually whenever I am talking to men and women about men and women about financial abuse,
Yeah.
they say they've never heard this term. you know. But economic abuse is part of the family violence law in India and in Australia. It's
Right.
just that we don't talk about it. Dowry is economic abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, all rolled into one. Yeah.
Mm, mm,
But economic abuse goes further than just taking the woman's money. It's trying to take the woman's family's money also. Yeah.
okay.
So economic abuse is a little bit broader than financial abuse
Mm,
because it means, sabotaging work,
mm,
sabotaging access to the
mm,
capability of work. Yeah. But financial abuse is denying a woman money, appropriating her assets,
mm,
as I said, not enabling her to get more money.
right.
And sometimes it's not just a disagreement that, okay, we want to buy this house or that house, or we want to send the child to private or public. It's not a minor disagreement. It is a pattern of control. It's called
Mm,
coercive control. It's a human rights crime.
yeah.
Basically, when I've interviewed women, some women have told me that the man just gives me coins, not notes, you know. And in some cases, when the woman is earning, he convinces the woman that, look, we're in Australia, we should do like Australians do, we should have a joint account. But his idea of a joint account is that his money is in the personal account, the
Mm,
woman's money is in the joint account.
mm,
So then the woman sees that in that account, as she's earning, the money is not coming in. So she asks him, where's my money? So he says, no, I've taken it out. And she tells him, well, why don't you leave a little bit of money so that I can also spend? And he
right.
turns around and said, you want to spend now? So sometimes this economic abuse is so great that the woman is left without anything, and it seldom happens on its own. It's always emotional abuse.
Mm,
To deny a woman money is always emotional abuse,
mm,
but it often then comes to financial abuse, and we are so unused to thinking about economic abuse, not
yeah.
just personally, but as a society, that it's only when, it becomes physical that the woman complains. Then she knows it's family
Mm,
violence. But to have this coercive and control to take away all your rights of what it is to be a person, that
yeah.
is family violence. It's the violence of money. Yeah.
Mm, mm. On very valid point, Supriya. But on the other side of the spectrum, if I were to ask you, like not these days, we have been aware of a thing called signing the prenuptial agreement. I think it's very essential that we do sign it. What are your thoughts, Supriya? You are an expert in this. What are your thoughts on signing a prenuptial agreement? Is it beneficial, or we should not think about it while getting in a relationship?
Depends, many people don't have very much before marriage. Yeah. Sometimes it's the parents who are most concerned that here is the woman bringing money into the marriage and property into the marriage, and particularly this prenuptial agreement in Australia, where we have community property, yeah, where the property gets divided between the husband and the wife,
Mm,
irrespective of who
yeah.
has paid the most during marriage. Yeah. Uh,
Mm,
then it is the parents who want to put a little bit of a barrier there. But I don't know
mm,
if prenuptial agreements can also be overturned. So I think
right.
parents who are thinking of this have to have some equity in the house. That
Mm,
is the way some parents that I have interviewed, when especially, parent migrants get into the problem. When
right.
parents come from India, they usually sell all their property.
Mm,
And then
mm,
they tell you, we're going to distribute it among our children. Yeah. And you find two-thirds has gone to the son, one-third to the daughter. Huh?
yeah.
and then they put all their money and give it to the sons sometimes, and they don't document it because they are used to thinking of money as family money. Yeah, that money and property belongs to the family.
Hmm.
And in India it's a separation of property. You
Right.
only at separation or divorce get the property that has your name on it.
Hmm.
Even if you have contributed to a property that is in your husband's name, you are not immediately eligible for it. There's a lot of talk that, this should change.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
Unless you have a very good lawyer, you don't get very much out of it. You even have to fight for maintenance. So they are used to that. And also, it's joint family property,
Hmm.
often in the parents' name, not in
Yeah.
the husband's name.
Hmm.
So here they think it is family money and it is separation of property. And they put all the money, give it to their son to put it in the mortgage.
Hmm.
And then if there is a divorce, then they get really taken aback that at least half of it has gone to the daughter in law. Yeah.
Yeah.
So some people now say, well, all right, we'll go joint with our children. And women and men who have experienced this, gone through the divorce of a child, they
Hmm.
now counsel every older person, if you give money to your children, put it in writing. Is this a gift? Is this a loan? Put it
Right.
in writing so
Right.
that what your aims are and what you hope to achieve with this is clear.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. I think that's a very practical way to go forward, Supriya. But you've mentioned about generational wealth. On that note, I want to ask you that do you see any particular change in the way women have been handling generational wealth? Or has there been a culture shift in how women handle their money inherited from the family?
All right. First, Chris, all over the world, women have less wealth than men.
Hmm.
In India, particularly, because you see it coming right through paid, less paid work, lower income at work, lower inheritance. So the generational wealth that you're talking about is definitely less. There's a gap in wealth, there's a gap in money. And remember, when we're talking about generational wealth, we are not talking about the majority of people in India. More than half the women in India have no money they can call their own.
Hmm.
And as we
Right.
know, only one fifth are in paid work. And one out of every five women in India that's in paid work does not control her own earnings. So when you're talking about generational wealth, you're talking about this very few women who
Hmm.
actually inherit any substantial wealth. And so the way you work it depends upon your circumstances. Over here, among the women that I have interviewed, it's not generational wealth that comes into the question. It's even being able to control your own jewelry, which is about the main generational wealth in, at the time of marriage that
Yeah.
you get, that a woman gets, that's her own. And that has symbolic meaning because, a mother tries to give her jewelry to her daughter, goes from grandmother to granddaughter, from mother to daughter. And one of the early signs of financial abuse is when a woman says that it is the jewelry is in her brother-in-law's locker or in her husband's locker, or
Yeah.
the mother-in-law has kept it
Hmm.
for safekeeping.
Yeah.
And jewelry is the first thing to go. Woman after woman says when the man left, he took the jewelry with him. That the jewelry was the first thing to go. So women sometimes can't even control their jewelry, and especially migrant women, they, if they have cash, yes, or their parents have helped them buy a property, then depends, how they've done the title.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if it's in some cases where women's parents have helped with the business, and I was, of course, interviewing women who had survived economic abuse.
Mm.
They tell me that the man just appropriated it and put it in his account. And often the joint account is empty when the woman leaves marriage. So it depends exactly on what you're meaning by generational wealth and
Yeah.
where it is and under whose name it is.
Yeah. Yeah. True. But Supriya, remember we started the conversation saying that it's kind of male dominated. We have patriarchy looming in, but often even I've heard this that mother-in-law tends to control her daughter-in-law's jewels. That you keep it with me, and then the daughter-in-law does not have access. It gets on passed to her sister-in-law, so on and so forth. Are women equally responsible for inflicting financial abuse on other women around them? What are your thoughts on this?
It's a little bit, now it's my turn kind of. Yeah. It's not always true. I've also heard some lovely stories about a mother in law who, I think, being the only daughter, only child, inherited land.
Yeah.
And she actually left it to her daughters in law. She didn't have daughters, she left it to her daughters in law. So I've sometimes also heard stories of the mother in law and the daughter in law actually advising her mother in law how
Mm.
to get access to some money of the father in law,
Mm. Mm.
because you must remember the mother in law has also been,
Mm.
not in
Yeah.
control of the money.
Yeah.
So it's a mother in law, and sometimes in a joint family among the women I've interviewed in India, the mother in law didn't even know her name was in the joint account until the husband died.
Okay.
Because in India, the joint account is meant to protect the woman, not to share transactions, but at death, that money goes to her outside the estate. So the women often find out that they are in a joint account, that they've signed off on it after the man dies. So now the old fashioned thing was that the son gives his earnings to the mother,
Yeah.
and the mother gives the son and the daughter in law money. But in this one family, it was very interesting.
Mm.
The son gave money to his wife to give to the mother in law.
Okay.
So he did it very well, because you
Mm.
see the morality of being a good son and a good husband can sometimes conflict. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
So he gave money to his wife to give to his mother. And
Mm.
so he was able to be a good son and a good husband. This is a very difficult thing to actually carry out, yeah. And
Yeah.
in remittances, we have great conflict. In remittances, money you send home, not
Mm.
just for need, but for care.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you are sending money home to build a 5-bedroom marble floored house, and you don't have enough for your wife and children over here, that is, in the whole of the global south, a
Yeah.
very big trigger for economic abuse.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that. I've seen that. Some of those articles as well. Supriya. I'm mindful of the time, Supriya. Just a few last questions before we wrap up the conversation. Is how do we start having these conversations on our dinner tables, enlighten and empower our young girls to be more in control of their money? How do we start, and where do we start from?
I think first you have to talk to them about money. I'm not talking dollars and cents necessarily. Usually they say, okay, teach your children how to save, how to invest. Of course, you do that. And teach your girls as well as your boys to
Right.
invest and save, right? You have to tell them how you feel about money. You have to tell them how you feel empowered or disempowered. You have to share the emotion of money
Hmm.
so that a person starts, whether you talk or you do not talk, your children are going to absorb something about the way you deal with money, right?
Right.
Going to see a woman who is disempowered, hiding it in the cupboard, all
Hmm.
right? They're going to see you having to ask your husband for
Hmm.
money, yeah, and him talking about it. So you have to talk about that, and you have to teach your children to be able to talk about how they want to use money to be the kind of person they want to be.
Right. Right.
And then you see, because we don't talk enough about money, one of the big problems is that we think that everybody deals with money the way you deal with it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody has grown up with money the way you have grown up with money.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then you get the shock of your life. So, my advice to all the young women in my life is, before you marry or commit in a relationship, you must share the story of money in your life. What you want to do with it, you want to work, what you want to achieve with it, in the kind of people you want to be, and listen to the other person's story.
Yeah.
What are your needs, I mean, I was interviewing one woman and she said before she married, for her, religion was very important.
Hmm.
She wanted to tithe, give 1/10 of her money for religion to the church. So she said she wouldn't have married the man if he had not said that he would tithe. And she knew that how each of them had grown up in working class families,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how the father had not been good with money. In another case, the father had actually been cheated by his brother. And
Yeah.
so this husband was very, very keen that he be very careful with money.
Hmm.
And so you had to see that your values about money meet at some point. And if they don't meet, how can you, with mutual regard, deal with each other's
Right.
needs of money?
Hmm.
And if you
Absolutely.
can't talk money, may I suggest you rethink whether you want to live with this person, because
Hmm.
money is intimate. If you can't share that kind of intimacy, will you be able to have intimacy in your relationship? Of
Absolutely.
course, some women don't have the power to talk about it
Yeah.
because
Absolutely.
they have no money. Yeah.
Very relevant what you said in the end, Supriya, that financial intimacy links into the overall intimacy of the relationship.
Yes, it's
We have
linked to
one,
your relationships. Yeah.
yeah. We have one quick question from Salia. She's saying, how do we get women interested in managing their money? What are some of your 5 quick steps about getting women taking charge of their monetary affairs?
Saleha, this is very important. Women sometimes do themselves a disfavor. A lot of older women say, "Oh, I don't want to have anything to do with money," right? Uh, and the man is always telling them, "For heaven's sake, you must know where the money is."
Hmm.
I might suddenly drop dead, yeah.
Yeah.
And they say, "But you do it very well." I think women have to take responsibility for managing the money. You can't just say, "Oh, well, he's the one that did it." He's the one who gave the money away. And especially educated women. I remember talking to a friend who said that her husband was, he treated her like a queen, but he thought he's going to live forever and didn't actually put a financial basis. And then he died too early. And I
Yeah.
asked her, that "You're educated, where were you? Why didn't you have responsibility?" And she said, "No, he wanted to manage it." So you have to kind of find a way that both of you are responsible for
Hmm.
what is happening,
Yeah.
especially if you're educated.
Yeah.
You know how to deal with money, and women are good managers.
Yeah.
So you have to be part of those decisions.
Hmm. Thank you, Supriya. That was, I think, Each and every word that you mentioned in these 30 minutes have been super important, very inspirational, and for even young, I'm not young anymore, I'm middle aged, younger women than myself, they'll find a lot of inspiration from your journey and your expertise. Thank you so much for joining us on our warm Sunday
Thank
evening.
you.
And to our listeners and audiences, this was Professor Supriya Singh highlighting on the importance of women and managing their own financial matters. Please take charge of your monetary matters because this is important and we are in the 21st century. On that note, Supriya, thank you so much for joining us and wish you all the best and have a great evening.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for that.
Thank you.